So I want to warmly welcome each of you and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to join me, whether you're here in person or you're listening to the recording. I'm really excited about the subject, investing men versus women and why it's important. And I suspect that not understanding these differences may be the reason so many of you may be struggling with money. It's certainly why I struggled financially my whole adult life. Every time I would ask my father about money, all he'd say was, "Don't worry." Of course, what he was really saying was that there'll always be a man to take care of you. And it's why I let my husband manage the money, my inheritance, even though I found out very early in our marriage he was a compulsive gambler. And he lost almost all of my inheritance. And it's why I had so much trouble figuring out my finances after my divorce. I truly believed that managing money was a man's job and I was incapable. And then something happened that changed everything. So I was working as a journalist and I was hired for a freelance project to interview women who were smart with money. And that's when I saw so clearly that these women approached investing so differently than the men I knew. And so not only did those interviews change my whole relationship with money, but I wrote my first book, Prince Charming Isn't Coming, How Women Get Smart About Money. And you want to hear something really telling? When my agent sent my book proposal to 15 publishers, 14 turned it down. I had 14 rejections and they all told me the same thing. You know what they told me? Women don't want to read about money. Well, 30 years later, that book is still selling. I've written 6 more books, all still selling. So obviously, women want to learn about money. But as I've witnessed over the years, the successful ones are doing it differently. And that's what I'll be talking about today. So the good news that since I wrote my first book when it came out in 1997, women have made considerable progress with household finances, like paying bills, sticking to a budget, balancing the checkbook. That's really good. But when it comes to making long-term financial decisions, to actually building wealth, we've made very little progress. So you might ask, why does building wealth even matter? Why not put all your money under a mattress where it's safe? I know you know this, but our biggest risk really as women is that we will outlive our money, that it will not grow faster than inflation. So according to a recent Fidelity study, 71% of women have all their money in cash. Now, that may feel safe, right? But over time, your money is losing your purchasing power. Over time, your purchasing power will shrink faster than a wool sweater and a hot dryer, I swear. So at least a portion of your money, at least a portion, needs to be invested in places like stocks, bonds, and maybe real estate, places that grow faster than inflation and taxes take it away. So the fact is, the whopping majority of women, we are just not protecting ourselves financially, even though we know we need to do more. And here's the irony. By that same Fidelity survey found that 82% of the women said they do want to learn about money. And here's the thing. Once a woman gets in the market, once she starts investing, she actually outperforms men. I'll tell you more about that later. So why, when we women have the desire, we have the ability, are we not acting in our own best? Why, even though the recognition is there, our resistance is stronger? So I have wrestled with these questions for 3 decades. And today I want to tell you the answer I've come to after extensive research. Men are different than women. Women are different than men. I mean, this is obvious, right? But the male-dominated financial industry clearly hasn't gotten the memo. I once read a quote attributed to Einstein, and you may have heard it. If you ask a fish to climb a tree, she'll always feel stupid. And the same is true with money. If you try to approach investing like a man, you will always feel like a fish out of water. So today I'm going to explain 5 ways we are different and why it matters. My intention is that you understand these differences, that when you understand these differences, you, instead of trying to do it their way, you'll honor your true nature and your feminine perspective. So before we go any further, I'd like you to take a moment and think about this. Ask yourself this question. What is my biggest financial challenge right now? Where are you feeling stuck, unable, or afraid to move forward? Where are you in avoidance? Where are you just plain scared? So think about that as I talk and see if what I say sheds any light on why you're having difficulty or how you could perhaps do things differently. I need to put in this disclaimer. I am speaking in generalities about men and women. Of course, there are exceptions. Of course, there are. But the point is, men and women in general are different in many ways and in regard to money. And my intention is that we celebrate those differences while understanding and honoring who we truly are. Okay, so let's start with the first way the gender's different. Our motivations for investing are quite different. Men are very motivated by perks, by profit, by personal gain. No matter how much money they have, the idea of having more is a very powerful incentive for them. It's not for us. Once we are financially stable, once we have food on the table, a roof over our head, we're really motivated by money alone. Sure, we want to make a profit, all of us do, but what really motivates us is not the profit as much as it is what we can do with our money. I see this in almost every successful woman I've interviewed. Amassing large sums isn't what excites them. What excites most of us is how we can use our money to carve out a better life for ourselves, help the people we love, and the causes we care about. So the problem I see it is the financial industry seems to believe that scary statistics and alarming statement and worst case scenarios will actually motivate us to take the financial reins. I mean, you've heard it. It's like 70% of women will never retire because they can't afford it. Women live longer, so 90% of us will be solely responsible for our finances. Come on, guys. Their tactics don't inspire us. They paralyze us. So instead, I want you, women, to motivate yourself to invest by thinking about how you can use your money to make a difference. And just as an aside, I think this is a very interesting piece of research from the University of Indiana School of Philanthropy. Men like to help others too. I mean, there's no question there. But it's so interesting that the sexes differ in their approach to philanthropy too. The top 3 reasons men gave for the reason they give is 1, to have a building named after them, 2, pressure from the office or their peers, and 3, to get a seat on the board. The top 3 reasons women give is 1, to make a difference, 2, to pass on family tradition, and 3, to give back to their community. So what's so interesting about philanthropy is that women generally donate more than men, but we give in much smaller amounts to twice as many organizations. So spontaneously dropping small change into plastic jars on supermarket counters may be a lovely gesture, but not necessarily the most powerful use of our philanthropic dollars. Giving small amounts willy-nilly dilutes the impact you can make with your giving when it's so much more impactful when it's focused and it's planned, but that's another subject for another day. Okay, so our motivations are different. The second difference, the process of investing and the way we communicate is different for men than women. For men, investing tends to be a purely practical process. It's all about the transaction. Performance is everything. Winning, losing, that's it. For women, investing for us is a far more emotional process. It's who we have to become. It's the internal changes we need to make to counter generations of cultural conditioning or parental messages. And going against deeply ingrained beliefs can generate a lot of fear. The financial industry, however, is based on the male model of communication. And this is important to keep in mind when you're interacting with financial professionals. Observe how they talk to you, like a man or a woman. Men communicate to obtain information, to establish status, and to show independence. They want to focus on the facts, only the facts, ma'am, and they want to talk about performance. Women, on the other hand, communicate to create relationships and make connections so we can build rapport and develop trust. He wants to be right, looked up to, and feel in control. You want to feel understood and accepted, seen and acknowledged. But in the financial world, conversations about feelings or fears are considered touchy-feely, not part of the financial planning process. And nothing could be further than the truth. I will never forget a conversation I had right after real soon after my Prince Charming book came out. I was contacted by a male researcher who was doing a major study on women and money sponsored by a large brokerage firm. And he had just come back from leading a focus group of women. And I asked him how he went. And he was shocked by his findings. You know what he told me? He said, women are very emotional about money. Like this was a novel idea. I guess to the financial industry, it is a radical concept, which leads us to the third difference. Men and women's brains process financial information differently. So men look at the market and they see an exciting challenge. Women look at the market and they see a dangerous threat. And since our prehistoric brains were wired to ensure our safety and survival, anytime we feel threatened, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. So what happens is that when this happens, women tend to avoid the markets like our ancestors fled from woolly mammoths. We fog up in self-protection, unable to absorb practical information, reluctant to invest, or just defer decision, you take care of it. Because our brain is screaming, danger, danger, don't go there. And we immediately recoil in resistance. So how do you combat that fear? And we're going to talk more about that. But the way you combat the fear and the feeling of danger is through education and support. Education is critical. For women, we are relationship oriented and we need our tribe. Ignorance breeds fear. Isolation exacerbates fear. Knowledge combined with support wipes it out. And that's what it was for me. I remember I decided to take time to educate myself. And what I did is I joined a group. This was way back in the 80s. I joined a group called Resourceful Women with other women in the same boat as me. It was a game changer. And it's why 5 years ago, I created a similar community of women supporting women, which I'll tell you about later. So we process financial information differently. We also, the fourth difference, women and men view risk differently. No surprise, men, since little boys, most have been groomed to be risk takers. That's how their brains were wired. They enter the market like their prehistoric ancestors hunted for wild game, boldly, bravely, with the expectation of gain. Now, we, whose forebears were tasked to keep the home fires burning, we look at the market and see the possibility of loss. But here's what's so cool. The reason we women are better investors is because our lack of confidence works in our favor. We get in the market and we trade less, and we tend to buy and hold for longer, which is a much more profitable strategy over time. So the problem, as I see it, is that we don't understand risk. As I said earlier, our biggest financial risk as women is not that the market will go down, because it will. That's what the market does. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and it goes down. But if you look at a graph of the market over time, you'll immediately see that although it's going up and down, the trajectory is up. And according to MarketWatch, there has literally never been a 20-year period in the past century or so that has resulted in a negative return for stocks. So if you have the patience to stay put, regardless of the volatility, and you're well diversified, the two secrets of minimizing risk and maximizing gain, staying put, being well diversified, you will be rewarded. You will be rewarded regardless of the doom and gloom. So I learned this while researching my book, Prince Charming Isn't Coming, in which I interviewed women who were really smart about money. So at the time, I was newly divorced from my gambling husband, who'd lost a fortune in trading stocks, one of his addictions. So of course, I saw the market as way too risky, a guarantee of loss. No way I was going to risk the little money I had left. So every woman I'd interview, I'd always ask, how do you have the guts to put money in the market? Always ask them this. And their answers were pretty much the same. They all told me something like, I know my investments will fluctuate. I accept that. I'm also confident over the long term, I will do well. They had learned, as I eventually did, that understanding risk is what makes you wealthy. So I love how Warren Buffett, and you know how Warren Buffett, I think he's the most successful investor in history or something like that. But anyway, Warren Buffett said, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And that is so true. I always say, because I learned it the hard way, the first rule of investing is never invest in anything you don't understand, whether it's an individual stock or the market itself, because not only do you not understand what you're buying, but you have no idea when to sell. The second rule of investing is that you invest for the long term and you diversify broadly. In other words, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't put all your money in, say, one company stock or only tech companies. Okay? Which brings me to my fifth point. Women and men learn differently. Men like to learn through trial and error. It excites them. They like it. We women tend to prefer to be taught about finances, and we love to learn in groups. According to an Emory University study, the pleasure and reward centers of women's brains light up. Our reward centers light up if we can work towards our financial goals in a cooperative way with other women. And this is why I created the Wealth Connection. It's an online community where women can talk about and learn about money as women. And research, lots of studies have shown women learn best, gain confidence more quickly, and experience higher levels of success and satisfaction in women-only groups. Believe me, we are not meant to take this journey alone. I've witnessed the miracles that occur when a woman finds her tribe, when she can actually authentically, deeply, openly talk about the practical, the psychological, and the spiritual parts of money. And once you no longer feel isolated, once you realize you're not the only one struggling, you start to experience an exquisite sense of belonging and you begin to feel safe, understood, and accepted. Let me summarize the gender differences when it comes to investing. Men are motivated by profit. Women are motivated by helping others. For men, investing is primarily transaction oriented. For women, the process tends to be much more emotional. Men see investing as an exciting challenge. Women tend to see it as a threat. Men look at market risk with the expectation of gain. We look at market and see the possibility of loss, which works in our favor. Men learn best through trial and error, and we prefer to be taught, especially with other women in groups. One way is not better than the other, but as I've learned, it's important to understand the way that works best for you. So I hope you found this helpful.